Do you guys know about the whole concept of like why reaction tech chasing usually isn't harder on netplay, on rollback? Because you know how Sheik players don't really like netplay because they say netplay tournaments aren't legit and all this stuff. Now, it's, I think, partially true. I think Sheik is not a good character, relatively speaking, on rollback netplay, on high ping. Sheik doesn't really get any advantages, and some other characters do. For example, characters like Fox and Falcon, the first part, like, they have these big sweeping dash dances, and if the ping is high enough, there's a big part of the dash dance that gets kind of cut out visually, right? So you can't react to them. You know, Falcon, on a bad enough connection, Falcon can, like, run across the stage in short omni, and you don't see it until it's almost at you, right? Sheik doesn't really have any advantages like that. So I do think that she kind of has a hard time on high ping rollback. However, something that is not harder for the most part is reaction tech chasing. And the reason that's the case, for the most part, and there's a caveat. I was talking about this with Leffen. We got, for some reason, me and Leffen and KJH got ramen at LACS actually. So this was like a month ago and we were talking about it. We were talking about high ping net play because Leffen was talking about playing JMOOC. He was like talking about how, he was talking about how he can't get good. You know how Leffen's always talking about how he can't get good practice in Europe. So he was complaining over ramen that he can't get good practice in Europe. And he was talking about like playing Zane and playing Cody and playing JMOOC from Sweden. And he was saying, you know, the things that are good practice and things that aren't good practice. So something that's very interesting is if he's playing JMOOC, imagine he's playing JMOOC from Sweden to the East Coast, right? For the most part, reaction tech chasing is actually the same level of difficulty as it is offline. Because the thing is, the way rollbacks work is the way that you get some kind of rollback that confounds you visually, like, oh, I couldn't react to that, is if there's like a new input that comes over the wire that, you know, happened very recently. And usually, think about how, let's say I'm a Spacey and I'm getting chain grab, I'm getting tech chased. Usually, if I want to tech in place, I am like, oh, I got grabbed by the Sheik, and then I'm like, I'm going to tech in, I decide to tech in place or something, and then I tech in place. And I've been holding no direction for a long time, and I do the tech, let's say 10 frames before I land. That's enough time that visually there's no rollback. Sometimes it's even more than that, 15 frames before I land. Like when I input the tech, like I've input that tech maybe 10, 15 frames in the past. On your end as the Sheik player, there's no rollback, right? So there's no concept of like, oh, it looked like something was going to happen, but then something else happened. Like, no, it looks the same as it would offline. It's the same thing. However, if as the Fox player who's getting tech, or Falco player or Falcon player, or whoever's getting reaction tech chased, if you know that it's high ping rollback, and if you want to mess with the Sheik player, or maybe it's a Falcon, maybe you're playing Wizzy or something. The point is, if someone's reaction tech chasing you and you want to mess with them and it's high ping rollback, you can hold a direction. Let's say I'm holding left, right? I'm holding left and I input a tech. And then at the very last moment on my screen, before I actually am about to hit the ground, I'm holding right now at the very last moment. So I hold left, I tech, and then I go right at the very last moment. Now, what you're going to see if you're JMOOC and I'm Leffen is you're going to see me tech to the left for a little bit, and then there's a rollback and you're actually teching to the right. You see what I'm saying? That is something that the Fox player intentionally has to do. And I don't think anybody's doing this. That's kind of the theory. Now, people might be doing this in netplay tournaments. You wouldn't do this if you're just playing friendlies with someone. If Leffen's playing friendlies with JMOOC and they're both trying to improve and get better, Leffen's not going to do weird tricks to fuck up JMOOC's reaction tech chasing, right? Like that's not good practice for either of them. You see what I'm saying? It's evil. It's evil. It is insane. And you could do it. You could do it and you would get out of the tech chase because they would see one tech and then there'd be a rollback and you'd be going somewhere else. Or you could do hold a direction, tech, and then now tech in place. And they'd run one way and then you'd see them roll. But there's no reason to do this unless you're literally playing a netplay tournament for money. Because what's the point? If Leffen's playing JMOOC for practice, they're practicing for offline. It is literally worse practice for both JMOOC and Leffen if Leffen is using rollback tricks to inflict rollbacks to screw up JMOOC's reaction tech chases. You see what I'm saying? And so Leffen was basically talking about how he's thought about all this stuff and how he could play JMOOC. And this is a common misconception. People say things like reaction tech chasing is impossible on high ping rollback. Reaction tech chasing is much, much, much harder online. It's not. If they want to be really evil, the Spaceys can make it harder, but that's something they have to do on purpose. And if they're doing it, it's like, why are you doing that? Are you planning on making a living off of winning the coin box every week for a couple? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point? And for some reason, I've never heard anyone mention this technique on stream or anything like that. Anyway, this is for all you guys. If you guys are all, if any of you are ever in a high stakes net play tournament, you're playing against a Sheik player coast to coast, and you really need to cheese out a win and they get a grab, this is something you could do. You did hear from me. I don't want the Sheik players getting mad at me, breathing down my neck. And there's other things you could kind of do with this information, right? Like if you're a Fox player trying to mix up your recovery. By the way, this is why edge guarding side B is a lot harder on high ping rollback, whereas edge guarding up B usually isn't. Because usually, imagine you're edge guarding like a Falco online, right? If they do up B, and then you move the stick into the direction that you want to up B in. right? Just think about how up B angles usually work with Firefox and with Firebird. You could up B and at the very last moment go to the direction you want, and so it looks like you go one way and then you go another way, and it rollbacks and it kind of visually throws them off and they don't get their coverage. But for the most part, that's not what people do. It doesn't really make sense. It's more difficult from an execution standpoint to do it that way. Now think about how side B works. If you side B and you want to go for a shorten, the way shorten works is you have to hit B at like the very last moment. It's a very precise timing. You do side B and sting, and then right with the sting, and you go forward. You hit B right as you're about to launch with the side B, and surprise, surprise, if you're on high ping, I mean, if any of you have ever played, 100 ping Falco or something like that, and they do a shortened side B, a lot of the time what it looks like is a full length side B, and then the rollback happens about a couple frames into it, and then they have magically teleported back and they're falling to the ledge from their short. And so this is the kind of thing that people kind of don't realize, but on high ping Netplay, it's just harder to edgeguard side B for this exact reason. Now, mind you, a lot of the time edgeguarding shorten is just doing it off of a read anyway, but this is an element of edgeguarding side B on reaction that I think is just a lot more challenging. And yeah, it's just something that people don't really think about, and I don't really feel like it gets discussed anywhere, so figured I'd point it out. The future is to go back to Anthers. I mean, Anthers incurs a lot of other problems. Anthers, there'd be random frame drops. This is kind of why I think, like, the characters that get nerfed and buffed on Anthers. So I think on rollback netcode, I think Fox is buffed. I think on Anthers netcode, I think Fox is nerfed. Spaceys in general, honestly, I think are just nerfed. Because if you ever want to do, like, a multi-shine input, there's usually just frame drops that stutter the game for a frame or two, and then you just miss your double shine, and then you're in the air. And there's a lot of stuff like that just happens on delay-based netcode where your input just kind of gets clobbered, and I think that kind of hurts. That stuff kind of hurts Spacey. Same with Captain Falcon. I think Captain Falcon is probably harder on delay-based netcode. I think Falcon's arguably a little bit buffed on rollback, if anything. Anthers would just, I mean, not Anthers. I'm saying Anthers was the ranking system. Really, we should just be saying delay-based netcode or faster melee. Yeah, on delay-based netcode, your inputs just get eaten or delayed. So there's a whole different suite of problems. Sometimes you try to shorten on delay-based netcode and you just don't even get a shorten. In fact, reaction tech tracing is actually, if it's laggy enough, it becomes free on delay-based netcode. Sometimes you play these connections with people who are really laggy, and when you play those people, you can tech chase for free because the game is literally so slow. It's moving at like 3/4 speed, and you can just see everything, and you're just like in the Matrix. And sometimes I used to play Sheik Fox. I hated Sheik Fox normally. If it was 40 ping, 50 ping, I hated Sheik Fox. But if it was like 120 ping, man, that shit was free because I could tech chase them for free and they couldn't get out. Same with wobbling. If you play Ice Climbers on delay-based netcode, that matchup was fucking impossible because you're bound to miss some L cancels and then they'd grab you and wobble you. But if it's laggy enough and stuttery enough, then they would drop their wobble. And that was really funny. So on slightly bad connections, Ices was torture. And you gotta remember wobbling was legal back then too. So Ices was fucking torture on a slightly bad connection. But on a really bad connection, it looped back around and they couldn't even wobble you anymore because they'd get a grab and they'd try to do their rhythm to get the wobble and then they just drop it. They would fuck it up. There was this really funny situation going on with delay-based netcode where there was almost some kind of bell curve where some matchups would get like harder, easier. It was ridiculous. It was just a show. I do not miss it. I really don't miss it. It is exactly like the 0 IQ versus 200 IQ meme. Oh, it was so funny.